Funny about that. You know who was asking about you the other day? Who's that? Nobody.
We talking about sports, get ball.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
What it do, you number one podcast listeners? You have tuned in to a brand new edition of the number one podcast in your headphones, Prem Brulee. I'm your host, Premal Bot, and I am joined once again by my big bro, Vish. Vish, welcome back.
What up, what up? Bot Bros coming back in March.
Back. Yeah, it has to be done, you know. March Madness calls for it. It's an ode to our former bracket pool days, so this is our new way of getting the fix.
For sure, for sure.
Number one podcast listeners, you know the drill. Let's get started with the FM or not without further ado. So, Vish, first up, the aforementioned subject, March Madness. FM or not? NIL, name, image, and likeness, is going to be the death, or already means the death of March Madness Cinderella teams. So a little context for number one podcast listeners. I'm sure most of you are in a bracket pool or two, or at least somewhat following March Madness so far in the men's tournament. Obviously, the women's tournament is hugely impacted by Juju Watkins tearing her ACL. Unfortunately, she was definitely one of the biggest stars in the women's bracket, so that's a sucky situation for them. But focusing on the men's bracket, we are on to the Sweet 16, and by region, in the South, you have a one-seeded Auburn against a fifth-seed Michigan, and a second-seed Michigan State facing off against number 6-seed Ole Miss. In the West, you have Florida, the one-seed, facing off against 4-seed Maryland. 3-seed Texas Tech is playing the 10-seed Arkansas, which is the highest seed remaining, or the lowest seed remaining, excuse me. In the East, number 1-seed Duke is going to play 4-seed Arizona, and the 2-seed in that region, Alabama, is going to face the 6-seed BYU. And finally, in the Midwest, the number 1-seed Houston is going to play the 4-seed Purdue, and the number 2-seed Tennessee is going to play the 3-seed Kentucky. So, all that to say, the final tally with the Sweet 16 teams, all 4 number 1 seeds are still alive in the tournament. 3 number 2 seeds are still in. 2 number 3 seeds. 3 number 4 seeds remain. 1 number 5 seed. There are 2 6 seeds remaining. And the lone single 10 seed. That makes up your Sweet 16. Altogether, there are 7 SEC schools, 4 Big 10 schools, 4 Big 12 schools, and Duke is the lone representative from the ACC. So those 4 conferences mentioned obviously are the Power 4. You are seeing no Cinderellas left. The 10 seed remaining is the SEC Conference's Arkansas, who is coached by John Calipari. So quite a name and a big open checkbook full of boosters. The one of the 6 seeds is also from the SEC. It's Ole Miss. The other 6 seed is BYU, who notably just paid the incoming number 1 recruit, AJ Dibansa, $7 million in NIL to come there next year. So we are talking big budget teams. Just adding context to this prompt. So once again, I ask you, Vish, I'll let you answer first. Yeah, fam or nah, NIL means the death of March Madness Cinderella teams.
This is a tough one. I love to zag or zig. I really don't think there's a way here. Ultimately, I do think yeah, fam. But for this prompt, for this year, I'm going to go with NAFAM. It's kind of around the same playoff that we talked about a couple months ago, I guess, when the Buckeyes won it. Go Bucks. That's right.
Go Bucks alert,
Go
baby.
Bucks alert.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
So it's hard to overreact right now, but where the trend is going, it doesn't look great. something needs to happen. Yeah. Something needs to be shown or moderated or whatever it might be. There needs to be a body that sits over this to be able to adjust and look at how people are transferring. I think we've already seen people enter the transfer portal and they're still playing, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge concern. I think there should start to be penalties for people that want to transfer back, 10, 15 years ago where you had to sit out if you transferred. Maybe you have to sit out if you transfer in conference, right? And so one of the notable missing links here was the Big East. St. John's is someone that was poised to make a run with Pitino, and they're not there. But again, it's something that ultimately I think it's going to be AFAM where we're going to look at it. But for right now, it's going to be an AFAM because it's just essentially the first year in it. Post all the 9-year, 10-year COVID people that were coming back, the 30-year-olds that were playing college basketball.
Yeah, I'm definitely with most of that, but I'm kind of leaning towards your NAF for right now. That's where my mind originally went because, of course, we are in a hugely reactive sports world, so everybody wants to say it's the automatic death of Cinderella teams. I mean, we don't truly have a huge sample size. Even last year, an NC State team, I know they're from a big conference, but they made a run in the tournament to make it far deep in last year's tournament. So you're even seeing teams that spent a lot that aren't making it far. So I don't necessarily think that it is a set thing that the Cinderella teams are no more. I want to wait to see a bigger sample size, and like you brought up, NIL could get watered down, toned down. Right now it's so new and it's the Wild West, so I think that type of stuff will regulate. This year is a hell of an example of NIL working, but there are quite a few teams. I mean, we're fans of Ohio State and the Big Ten. There are a bunch of teams that spent money. Like you brought up earlier in our conversation, Rutgers has 2 potential top 5 picks. So I want to give you credit for bringing that up. 2 top 5 NBA picks, and they're nowhere to be found in this tournament.
Petty alert. Petty alert. Petty
Ohio
alert.
State spent a decent amount of money. They got some big name transfers. They worked their way out of the tournament. I don't let them upset me enough even to put them on You Played Yourself, so we can just mention that one in passing.
I say petty.
I don't necessarily think it's the death of Cinderellas in the tournament. I'm gonna wait to see mode with this because I think a team that has some cohesion could outdo someone who spent a lot of money in the portal, because you see team chemistry could be the great equalizer. That's how it's historically been for Cinderella teams. Remember when we thought like these big schools with insane recruiting classes, they thought like the one and done era or jumping straight from high school was going to be the death of like college basketball, and Cinderellas, the one and done era of college basketball is supposed to be the death of Cinderellas. We've had this every time, and it regulates the format of this tournament lends itself to anything can happen. And before this year, we didn't have a lot of chalk like this, so I'm not ready to make a sweeping conclusion about anything just yet. But it definitely is telling, because we have 1 double-digit seed, and they're an SEC school, and they're probably only a 10 seed because they started out so slow and then had to make up for it. But, I mean, it's as big of a name as you can get in John Calipari, and the rest are 6 seed or above, as I broke down. So we'll see what happens in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, we talked about Rutgers. Even if you look at the NBA lottery, right, and some mock drafts, aside from the Duke players, you have a lot of players that are with teams that are outside looking in right now, right? Yeah. We talked about Rutgers. There's a Texas individual as well. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to try to understand if I know their names. We'll get to that a little bit later. But I think that's something where we just don't know right now. And I think it's that perfect storm, right? We saw that with our Ohio State football team. We saw that really with Texas, right? We saw that a little bit with Oregon, even in football, where you have to really hit. But if you don't hit, you're going to miss really bad. And we talked about Florida State in football, and Rutgers, certainly, they spent a shit ton of money, and they're outside looking in. I don't even think they finished above 500 total, which is a huge concern when you have 2 top 3 picks outside of Cooper Flag.
Totally. That basketball binge watching calls for some focus at work. In comes Magic Mind, #1 podcast listeners. Following the holidays, I've now been back at my regular Magic Mind peak the last 3 months. I've had to return to the office full time, but I haven't felt the days drag so far. I've remained focused and don't have that midday lull in productivity. I also haven't found myself seeking out that midday caffeine kick, and I attribute that to the positive impact of Magic Mind and taking it consistently. And best of all, I've talked about this before, but health's a priority for me, and obviously part of that's genetics, but just trying to maximize my physical and mental health, like I've talked about to you, #1 podcast listeners, for my wife and my kids and the people around me. And Magic Mind helps me feel aligned in my intentions of eating right and exercising. And I think it's largely because of their scientifically backed clean ingredients that help me to reinforce those. You already know, I've been telling you, #1 podcast listeners, about it for months, but the proof is in the fact that I use it myself, and my close family and friends do too. In fact, just this past weekend, my brother-in-law was telling me about his caffeine intake at work, so I sent him home with some Magic Mind shots to try out and hopefully help him throughout the day not consume as much coffee. He also does tea, so Vish, you use it too. You're a believer in Magic Mind. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I think the added plug is the clean ingredients, but I also think there's like vitamins and nutrients that you get that are natural that go into it. So especially with the weather changes in the Midwest, instead of up in that vitamin C intake, take some Magic Minds. It's really nice to be able to use that and feel good, and hopefully kick whatever crud you have.
Hell yeah. So again, you're seeing it, #1 podcast listeners. I wouldn't just recommend it to the closest people in my life if I didn't believe in it. So that's why I am passing on my knowledge to you, and I wouldn't just send you out there blindly. So I got to take care of y'all. You can get 20% off a one-time purchase or 48% off subscriptions by going to magicmind.com/prem. That's magicmind.com/PREM. When prompted, enter the code PREM20. That's PREM, the number 2, the number 0. And it gets you up to 48% off. If I were you, I'd get the subscription. It's the better value. It ships free to your doorstep every month, so you don't have to worry about running out. You can stash it in your fridge and grab it on the go. Put it in your lunchbox for that midday pick-me-up, however you choose to best utilize it. I've tried all the methods, and they work fantastically. There is nothing to lose. Magic Mind has a money-back guarantee and easy cancellation if you change your mind, though, like I've told you before, I don't think you will. So don't play yourself. Get yourself some Magic Mind. Save yourself some money by using that code PREM20 at magicmind.com/prem. Speaking of money, the Bengals paid Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Vish. So, Jamar Chase...
Insane.
Jamar Chase got a 4-year extension for $161 million. He is the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. I think Myles Garrett's streak lasted about a little less than a week. His wide receiver running mate, T. Higgins, signed a 4-year, $115 million deal. He becomes the highest paid wide receiver 2 in the league. My question for you, Vish. Yeah, fam or nah, paying 2 receivers this much money Actually, you know what? Since you went first, I'll go first, and I'll get your take here. But Yafem Renah to paying these two that much money, tying up that much money in their wide receiver room. I personally am a nah, because their quarterback and two wide receivers are going to account for $110 million a year. The cap is likely going to be at or above $300 million soon. So it's going to increase. It continues to increase. But that ratio of three players taking up at or over a third of the salary cap is wild to me. And to me, it's a lot to set aside for technically just two position groups. I thought the Bengals could have used that money specifically from the T. Higgins deal to shore up a defense that was not very good. But I'm a nod to this one. What about you, Vish?
Yeah, it's really hard to see otherwise, right? I mean, you're spending so much money, not just on a elite wide receiver, one of the top quarterbacks, I get it, but a wide receiver too. And not to mention, I think we talked about it last time with the NFL free agency. It was like a throwaway, but they signed their tight ends for like an $8 million extension for no reason. I can't even think of the guy's name.
Mike
Sorry,
Gesicki.
Bengals fans. Mike Gesicki. Sorry, Bengals fans. There's a bunch of people that I can't fathom spending that much money while rooting for a team. And you talked about it not being able to pay some of their defensive players.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing about this is historically the Bengals haven't paid people. So for them to go all in on positions like this that matter, but really the quarterback is where the money is at. The one caveat that I wanted to add, and I want to get your feedback, is even though Higgins has a high price tag, it seems like he has a pretty friendly cap hit.
Nice.
So the Bengals are able to get out of it. Mike Florio, one of our favorites. Not really. There's some sarcasm that's sensed there from Pro Football Talk. I think I saw an article where I'm going to try to boil it down. The cap hit after 2026, it's $7.5 million.
Yeah.
So with the cap going up, considering it's not too bad. People have had larger cap hits, so that's the only out I could see. But they better be damn sure it works.
Yep. Yeah, that's nice context to add, because the number is definitely sticker shock, but it does matter how you can get out of contracts nowadays in the NFL. So that's a key piece that gives the Bengals an out and still keeps their wide receiver 2 happy. A guy a lot of people didn't think would be kept. But on that note, I don't want to lead the witness too much. Let's hit that intro for You Played Yourself.
I'm petty as hell. And I'm super petty.
Here we
Petty Le Pew.
go.
All right, number one podcast listeners, it is time for You Played Yourself. Quite the segue. We're leading from Yafem Renah into our first You Played Yourself, which appropriately goes to the Cincinnati Bengals social media team for taking a victory lap, running a collection of sound bites from various sports programs, radio hits, what have you, about the fact that the Bengals signed both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins when a lot of folks thought it wasn't possible. The reason I put this on You Played Yourself is that it's not that they didn't think it was possible. It's just that they thought the Bengals maybe shouldn't.
So, congratulations. You played yourself.
Taking a victory lap before you know it's going to work, to me, is wild. It is screaming old takes exposed material. And in fact, despite numbers that they've put up, despite a team-friendly deal like you outlined in terms of cap hit, Vish, just a second ago, from a team standpoint, you actually have 4 years of proof that this recipe has not worked, because they've had Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow combo. And yes, they have a Super Bowl appearance, but at the end of the day, that only counts just for that. They have a lot more early exits from the playoffs / missing the playoffs, and consistently what they have is slow starts to the season, seems like every year. And that was with a majority of it with Joe Burrow and or Jamar Chase on rookie deals, T. Higgins on cheaper deals too. So they had more cap space during that time, and it still didn't lead to anything. So they figured, why not throw more money at it and leave less room for other positions? So my You Played Yourself goes to that seemingly like, gotcha bit of social media work. I know they're just doing their jobs. They were excited to get both receivers in the building, but pump the brakes a little, because the track record does not go in your favor. Despite putting up gaudy numbers on offense, your issue this whole time has been defense, and you just left yourself with less room for building your defense.
Could almost say the Bengals had just one of the most ultimate zags of all time, right? Yeah. Them paying this, we've talked about it almost ad nauseum. And if you are a Bengals fan that signs off on this, I know that you're excited because they're flashy, fantasy football is big. If you're a Bengals fan that signs off on this, God love you, and a huge You Played Yourself.
Petty alert.
Right?
Petty alert. Petty
Sorry.
alert.
If you actually think this is going to work, great. And we might end up eating our words, but like you said, the track record is pretty shitty on this. I can't imagine it going any other way, and so much pressure now is on Joe Burrow. He has two weapons that are paid like an astronomical amount. Yeah. So Joe
and he
Burrow,
wanted this.
He wanted it, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this before. The reason why all these naysayers came out is because the Bengals historically have not paid their players. Yeah. They've let them go. They've been cheap. They're awful in terms of being able to offer things to their players. I think they're one of the worst in the league when it comes to it. They don't even offer full facilities. They don't even offer full meals to their players the whole time. Yeah. And meanwhile, you have three players making a little over a third of your cap, even if the cap goes up to $300 million.
Yep. All right. A quick circle back to the NCAA tournament, the men's side. You Played Yourself goes to UNC making the NCAA tournament. UNC, obviously everybody talked about them getting in as the biggest surprise of the field announcement. They went 1-12 in quad 1 games. None of their 8 wins after February 15th, because the narrative was that they got hot to end the season, which they did. I think they went 8-2, and their 2 losses were to Duke, who is a number 1 seed. But their 8 wins after February 15th, none of them came against top 65 net ranked teams. To make things worse, the NCAA selection committee chair was UNC athletic director Bubba Cunningham.
Who?
Now, of course, the rules are that they have to recuse themselves when their own school is being discussed. But it's hard to ignore the bad optics, because no matter what, people who are discussing the committee chair's team still know he's just outside the room. So you could have the best, purest intentions. That human nature side of things had to have played a part. And no, before anybody out there says it, them winning their first 4 game in Dayton against San Diego State does not make this decision to let them into the field any less egregious. It is not results-based. It's what you did in the regular season leading up to it. And they didn't beat anyone. And routinely, NCAA March Madness committees have talked about those ever-important quad 1 wins, and they didn't win any of them. So they literally awarded a team for getting cheap wins elsewhere versus not winning any of their big games. So You Played Yourself goes to the committee more so, because North Carolina can't exactly blame them. It's not like they're going to decline their invite out of ethics or something. But yeah, you played yourself. Goes to the committee and UNC.
Could you imagine being Bubba Cunningham? Oh, I'm going to leave the room real quick. And you come back in the room. Hey, guys, how did it go talking about UNC? Huh? What did you guys think?
Great.
Nudge,
Did
nudge.
you see
Yeah.
the I get it. UNC is a brand. They have the talent. We talked a little bit about the NIL, who names it, but they underperformed at every level. Not just underperformed, they looked god-awful, too.
Yep.
I just can't imagine the other committee members. Hey, Bubba, we're not going to go with UNC. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How would the rest of the meeting go? How would the rest of the selection process go? God only knows.
Okay, this one I had to tack in there. I know he's going to be getting roasted left and right, but we're not above it. Sound it, baby.
Petty alert.
The next You
alert.
Played Yourself
Petty
goes
alert.
to Milwaukee Bucks head coach Doc Rivers. So Doc Rivers was interviewed by Mark Spears, and Doc Rivers is approaching / going to pass Phil Jackson on the all-time wins list, which is quite impressive, shows longevity in coaching. But amidst the Q&A with Mark Spears, Doc Rivers said that he doesn't get enough credit for winning 3 games in the playoff series where he blew 3-1 leads.
So, congratulations. You played yourself.
He said, quote, "No one tells a real story, and I'm fine with that. It's unfair in some ways. I don't get enough credit for getting the 3 wins. I get credit for losing. I always say, what if we had lost to Houston in 6? No one cares. One of the things that I'm proud of is we've never been swept. All the coaches have been swept in the playoffs. My teams achieve. A lot of them overachieve, and I'm very proud of that." End quote. Now, I think his quote speaks for itself, why it's obviously on You Played Yourself. But I wanted to give the number one podcast listeners context. If you're not a big NBA fan, you know, I want to put this in perspective because you could have forgotten about this over as many stints at different teams. This was from @AmyKnowsBall on Twitter. Just a little reminder for everyone. Doc Rivers' teams have blown 3 3-1 leads. They've blown 5 3-2 leads. They've blown 1 2-0 lead. Doc Rivers' teams have lost Game 7 at home 5 times. They've been eliminated 11 times at home altogether. And have gone 16-34 with the chance to close out a series.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
Yikes. And you want to get credit for just barely losing a series that you needed one more game to win. That is insane. Insane to be a competitor in a sport and trying to claim a silver lining of some sort. Read the room. Even if you think that, do not say that out loud. Don't let it be put in writing. Are you kidding me? These people are so unaware of their stance in the sports world or something. I'm convinced they have no earthly idea how they're perceived. Maybe they don't care and it's more power to them. But why on earth would you even let that be put in writing and make yourself look like a schmo? Insane.
As the great Ricky Bobby said,
Gene, if you ain't first, you're last. You know what I'm talking about? That phrase, trademark, not to use it outside.
it is, I can't believe, when I read this quote, I kind of had to do a double take. And Mark Spears is a reputable writer in the NBA circles. So knowing him, he probably gave Doc Rivers a heads up or some outs like, are you sure you want me to say this? I'm about to post this and you're about to catch some shit. I just cannot believe that him getting credit for wins, even though he's not able to close, in the grand scheme of things, like you said, it's actually worse if you think about it.
You'd
Even if
rather
you
get
say it out loud.
swept.
Yeah, you'd rather, right? And I think that was kind of his point, but it's lost, especially as a head coach, as a former NBA player. He has to be competitive, right?
To be that blissfully unaware would be nice, man.
It is outrageous. I cannot believe that that's there. And then especially when you put it in context, holy hell.
A quick you played yourself. Just want to put a bow on the NFL Combine and post-Combine. We're approaching the draft. Another plug. I have a confirmed recording time with our guy Thomas Lewis for the NFL Draft Preview. So you number one podcast listeners, be ready. Check my social media. My social media handles are in the description of every episode, but I'll be prompting for questions that you want answered from him. So be ready, number one podcast listeners. But my You Played Yourself goes to NFL Combine and post-NFL Combine rumors. These stupid narratives with no name attached to sources impacting players' draft stock are insane to me. That you could hide behind a unnamed source and impact someone's ability to make millions of dollars and set their family up just from what could be a totally fake narrative and has nothing to do with what's on the field. It's crazy to me. It's crazy how draft stock can rise and fall with the words. And I've maintained, like, I love the NFL draft, but there's probably far too much time in between the offseason and the draft because there's no way it doesn't negatively impact more people than it positively impacts them. So that's my You Played Yourself. Vish, do you have any to add to our pantheon for this episode?
I think we could probably spend a whole You Played Yourself for the entire AFC North, maybe outside the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
We talked about the Bengals. We didn't even really mention the Browns, who are just in a shit show of cap hell with Deshaun Watson and likely going to have to draft a quarterback if one's available. We'll get there. I think Thomas is going to help address that.
Yeah, the latest rumor is that they might trade down. Of course, speaking of draft rumors and what you can believe.
They get a nice ransom. The Browns should trade down because they decided to hang on to Myles Garrett and not get some of that draft capital. Anyways, the team that we haven't spent too much time on, I know we probably have some Pittsburgh Steelers fans in here, so I always just like driving a knife into some of our number one podcast listeners because we can't always just talk about the Cowboys and the lack of their insert blank here, right? One of the teams more recently, so Russell Wilson just signed with the New York Giants.
Yeah.
We talked about Justin Fields last time.
It's a one-year deal worth up to $21 million, $10.5 million guaranteed. Russell Wilson Mr. Unlimited is gonna be in New York.
Mr. Unlimited. Yeah, you gotta be unlimited. You know, you gotta
join Jameis Winston.
Yeah. What a QB room. Yeah.
The Pittsburgh Steelers. I saw Warren Sharp tweet this out. The QB depth chart since the 2023 season has had 100% QB turnover.
Crazy.
The entire room.
Wow.
Some people have come back. So in 2023, Kenny Pickett, who's now with the aforementioned Cleveland Browns, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph. In 2024, last year, that was
Mr.
Russell Wilson. We just talked about him.
Unlimited.
Justin Fields, Kyle Allen. And so far on their roster is Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. So in 3 years' time, they're going to have a completely new quarterback room. And this is the team that makes the playoffs, but is a team that is always discounted. Mike Tomlin is a wonderful coach. God love him of how he creates a great team that gets above 500, sneaks into the playoff, beats a few teams here and there. But at the end of the day, them not being able to address the quarterback room is very similar to the Indianapolis Colts not being able to address their quarterback room post Andrew Luck. You just have to, at some point, double down on someone, add some depth, add some actual competition, and they just haven't been able to do that. So,
nice. Well, not nice for them, but that is wild to think that. And they're going to have 100% turnover for sure this year because with Russell Wilson not coming back, It
is remarkable that this team somehow gets away with it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Steelers, but it is just a hilarious thing to me where they have a wonderful defense, a great coaching staff, and their Achilles heel has been the quarterback room for post Ben Roethlisberger, even his last few years for Big Ben.
Yeah, they are picking at 21, and there are a lot of, speaking of rumors, that they might go quarterback at 21. Last time they picked around there was to get Kenny Pickett, so I know that makes Steelers fans apprehensive, but a little bit more on potentially the Steelers in a few segments, number one podcast listeners.
What it do, baby?
Steelers fans out there, we got the content for you. Maybe you are not excited for it, but we're here nonetheless. You gotta deal with it, just like us, alleged Cowboys fans have to as well. But, number one podcast listeners, let's move on to Am I Hatin'? And as a reminder, number one podcast listeners, if you have a clip like last episode, our guy Lopez submitted one, please feel free to do so. We would love to hear from you. What are you hating on from this past week? What's been bothering you lately? What'd you notice? We'd love to hear from you. So, number one podcast listeners, if you have one for us, please get a hold of us. Again, social media is in the episode description. You know how to get a hold of us at Prem Brulee. So, without further ado, my Am I Hatin' for this episode is not waving thank you in the mirror while driving, in the rearview mirror. We got out of the pandemic and forgot how to wave thank you now. Like, I've been seeing a lot more of it. If I let you in front of me, the common courtesy is to wave thank you in the mirror, no? Do we forget that, or are we just assuming things in large vehicles that can cause a lot of damage? Like, we're too good to say thank you now? And keep in mind, number one podcast listeners, I'm in the Midwest. This is what we do here. Maybe the area you're in doesn't do that. Maybe you number one podcast listeners out in New York, you guys do not do that. Your honk is your thank you. I don't know. But here we say thank you. And this is a PSA. Like, if someone lets you in, the common courtesy is to wave thank you. Whether they see it or not, at least you did it. But I definitely look for it, and I definitely give out thank yous if someone is courteous to me in a vehicle. So that's my Am I Hatin'? What do you got, Vish?
I love that. I don't think I've noticed it as much, but I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to if people are actually saying thank you. So my Am I Hating is going to be March Madness related. We talked last time about people that just don't pay or even fill out their brackets. We talked about that.
The bracket pool managers in my life appreciated that clip that we put on social media too, so they were very happy with us sticking up for them. So,
yep, and many of you number one podcast listeners were part of the Bot Bros pool for a very long time, so you can actually relate. If you think we're talking about you, we probably are.
Yeah.
Sound those alarms. My Am I Hating is when random people, whether you see them at work, see them out in the community, see them at a bar, hey, how's your bracket doing? I don't give a flying fuck.
Nor do I really know.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I actually get what my picks are. I'm like, I think I picked that upset. At the end of the day, I really don't care. I love rooting for upsets. Who cares? It's sometimes the money's going to the winner who might not even take it seriously. either way, I am just really tired of random people asking me about my bracket. And I talked about how I casually watch college basketball. I probably watch more non-Buckeye and Duke games than most people. So if something's on and nothing else is there, I'll throw it on. But a lot of the people that are asking me, this might be the first time. They might pick it up in March. I get it. It's a whole thing. I, in turn, have actually stopped asking people, how are your brackets doing?
Yeah.
So I think they've started getting the hint.
Yeah.
Or you can just throw out some random shit or talk about a team that's not even in the tournament and see how they react and see what happens.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I really think Rutgers is going to make it. They got some top lottery picks. Oh wow, yeah.
Well, I didn't have them. Yeah, nobody did.
No one did. There
Yeah,
you go.
if you're like me, I kind of like, I have a few bracket pools too, and I kind of spread the wealth. I don't pick the same one. I don't go all in on one bracket. So I'm like, I mean, I don't keep track of which ones were better than others. And in reality, I usually miss some on one and then make some on others, and I never put it together on one bracket. It's such a crapshoot. Any bracket pool that you're in, it's pure luck if you win it, and I don't think anybody thinks otherwise. So, but love that one. Very poignant for right now.
I try.
Number one podcast listeners, let's move on to who you got and what you feel, and let's pay off our last few teases from earlier. Last episode, there's nothing to really recap. Truly, we talked about the Stephen A. Smith versus LeBron saga.
It's still going on.
Still going on, but not much more to talk about versus what we already discussed. But this week, I did want to put a bow. We talked a lot about NFL offseason moves, but after sitting on it for a little bit and as teams kind of start to take shape pre-draft and recognize what they still need to address in the draft coming up in about a month, another plug for the upcoming NFL draft preview. You know, I got you, number one podcast listeners.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
But Vish, I wanted your take on the best move of the NFL offseason so far in your opinion, and the worst. We already talked about a couple of new moves that I wanted to talk about here. Russell Wilson, we gave you the contract details up to $21 million just for it's a 1-year deal. He's got 10.5 guaranteed. Joins a room with Jameis Winston. The other one that just happened, a now former Texan, goes back to the AFC East. Stephon Diggs, coming off a torn ACL, signed with the New England Patriots on a 3-year, $69 million deal. Nice. With $26 million of it guaranteed. They evidently feel good about his recovery and wanted to give Drake May some help. That seems to be quite a theme for second-year quarterback teams. So those are the two new moves. We talked about a whole bunch of them in the last episode, so I won't recap all those. But best move of the offseason so far and worst, I'll go first and get your take, Vish. My best move, nice segue from what the Patriots did, but also the Bears and Commanders prioritizing their young quarterbacks while they're on rookie deals. The Bears shored up their offensive linemen by getting 2 free agent starting offensive linemen. And the Commanders seem to be signing people left and right. They lost a couple of key defensive linemen, but they're adding weapons for Jaden Daniels and shoring up their team while he's still on a rookie deal coming off a Rookie of the Year season. So love teams helping out young quarterback. You see the Texans have done that too lately with CJ Stroud. They did it last year, and they got offensive line to figure out, obviously, like we talked about. But my worst move of the NFL offseason so far is the Niners. It is not so fun when you have to pay your quarterback, huh, Niners? They are seeing a lot of players walk out the door. They've had quite the success over the years and had fun at the expense of my alleged favorite team. So I think teams are finally seeing those the results of their, they had their benefits of the rookie quarterback, with seemingly were able to pay everybody else, and now with Brock Purdy due to get paid, they've had to make some tough decisions. So a lot of people outgoing. We'll see how they do. Couldn't eat my words, but we will find out. What about you, Vish?
The one thing I wanted to add with the Niners, I completely agree. I'll get to it, but we forgot that they lucked out with Brock Purdy being Mr. Irrelevant with the Trey Lance thing, right?
Trey Lance, they missed on that one.
Complete miss, complete whiff. So we'll see how they react. I completely agree with you in terms of rookie quarterback or quarterbacks on their rookie deals, and just shoring up and making sure to spend essentially what you'd be spending if they're on their max deals. We saw the Texans do it last year. They continue to do it. They continue to sign people. The Broncos are even trying to do that with, the cap hits still from the Russell Wilson implications. So they've had a really great offseason considering. And so I think it's something where it helps, right? It gives you some leash and some leeway, especially if you have great coaching staff that go along with it. Mm-hmm. The Commanders surrounded Jaden Daniels and that whole team with Dan Quinn. He's won before. He understands what it's like to perform under pressure. And the Bears actually they got the hottest name from the head coaching side as well, right? Yeah. Ben Johnson joining and shoring up that offensive line, like you said. So no qualms around it. The worst, even though we talked about it, is going to be the Bengals, right? Yeah. And we could be wrong, like we said. But if they're unable to lock up their defensive star, Trey Hendrickson, it's going to be really tough. There might still be some teams that are out there that really haven't made moves, but like you mentioned, when you and Thomas talk about the NFL draft and when it actually happens and we debrief on it, there might be other teams where you're like, what the hell were you guys doing in the offseason? So,
yeah. This isn't a particularly top-heavy draft. It has some depth pieces in there, so these teams counting on filling out their roster purely with young players, I mean, we'll see if that works, but I don't see that being truly effective. So, anyway, staying in the NFL, we brought up a few of these teams before, so paying off a nice tease from earlier, there is one pretty big quarterback domino now left.
Who?
So, Vish, where does Aaron Rodgers end up? The aforementioned Pittsburgh Steelers have been linked to him. The Giants were originally, but now that they signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston this past week, that seems like not on the table anymore. The Minnesota Vikings have not guaranteed the QB1 spot to their rookie quarterback from last year, J.J. McCarthy, yet. So there's some people that think maybe that's a dark horse pick and would fully realize the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers quarterback arc repeating itself. So I think people are kind of a fan of that little cohesion working out. But where does Aaron Rodgers end up? My take is, even though he spent a whole day there and somehow left without signing a deal, this guy is the most non-committal person, I think. The last option before I get there is potentially retiring, because I think that's what's taking him a while. So that's an important consideration too. That's a very real option. But even though he spent a whole day there, I think the report was that he was there for 6 hours but left without a contract. I think it's going to be Pittsburgh, and part of that is how they're kind of desperate. They just traded for and paid DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens. They reportedly believe in Mason Rudolph, but that sounds like coach speak, kind of. I know he's been on that team before, but I can't imagine you're going with this good of a roster and investing in the roster around a potential quarterback to not go and get a big name. Or I think they might also draft one along with it. So I'm going with Pittsburgh. What about you?
What do I think? I think it will end up retiring.
All right.
What would I love? The Steelers, just because to see that room,
That combo would be hilarious.
that combo. I stopped watching Hard Knocks just because it became just a full-on production. It was fine here and there to watch clips, but I would just love to just be a fly on the wall for Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens, not just in the offseason, but all year long. Maybe Rodgers still has it. He played relatively well coming back into it. I think outside of another injury happening to another player and them kind of getting desperate and being in a win now mode, the Steelers are pretty much the lone team standing at this point, right? So,
yeah. All right, number one podcast listeners, let's move on to what you feeling. And what I'm feeling lately, my wife and I finally caught up on White Lotus season 3. Love that show. I don't know how that showrunner Mike White thinks of this stuff, but very cool. And the way he shoots that show, it's like crazy. It must be so fun to be an actor on that show. And what I'm feeling, I know you wouldn't shout out yourself, but Vish, your birthday was just recently, so shout out you. Happy birthday, big
Thanks.
bro.
thank you.
We love
Appreciate
you.
it.
I love you. The number one podcast, but listeners love you. So that's what I'm feeling lately. Vish, how about you?
Thank you. Love you too. Love you too. Yeah, I really tested the number one podcast listeners, especially our Bengals and Steelers fans, but I appreciate it. Appreciate all the love. It's really cool just to feel that love, and you guys are there, and love bearing notice's little cameo appearance, if you will, right? So that was really cool. I'm with you. White Lotus has been a phenomenal show. I'm pretty caught up with season 3 as well. This year, they're, I think, stretching some boundaries. If you've caught up, we won't spoil any details. Severance season 2 ended. It wasn't as great as season 1,
Okay.
but it still was an okay season. It's worth going
We're gonna
through.
have to catch up on that one next.
Yeah. And so season 2, the way it ended was pretty remarkable. The one thing I would almost recommend is, without having to watch a lot of these episodes twice, is Ben Stiller and Adam Scott actually have a Severance podcast. So after you're done listening to Creme Brulee,
What it do, baby?
re-downloading it, listening again,
Hell yeah.
re-downloading, listening again, comes in threes.
Yeah.
Check that out, and it helps bring context into how they actually think about a lot of those areas. Recently, I've gotten into the show called The Pit on Max. Do not be eating snacks. We're team snacks here. I love eating snacks while watching it, and while watching TV in general. But this is a show where even if you're not squeamish, it's really heavy. I would also have a rag or a box of tissues. There's some episodes that are extremely heavy. There's a few of my friends that say it's some of it's pretty real. I mean, they stretch some of it, but
You mentioned it last episode, and I had a lot of people reach out saying it's really good and very heavy.
Yep.
And to warn you about it.
the last thing I wanted to do, it kind of happened more recently. We're both Stroh's fans.
Hell yeah.
Get the hose mad alert. But in this case, you really love to see it. So Kyle Tucker, our beloved Kyle Tucker, was traded away in the offseason to the Cubs. One of the prospects that the Astros got in return is Cam Smith. He's 22 years old. For context, he was born in 2003.
So, congratulations.
You go.
played yourself.
But he recently made the Astros big league roster, and the Astros front office, their managerial staff, they actually brought his mom to deliver the news, not over the phone, but in person. So they actually flew her out. So speaking of getting your tissues ready, it's allergy season, high dust season.
Yeah.
Just have tissues on hand for everything we're talking about. Maybe we're just too sentimental now. Maybe it just comes with getting older.
No, those ones,
so.
the call up to the big league ones,
That's
walk-ons
cool.
getting
That's cool.
scholarships, they just
Yep.
they get you every time. So Yeah, it was very cool. He was going to be the opening day starter in right field as a very young player. So pretty cool to see the bright future he's got. Yep. And that was a cool moment. Nicely handled by the Stros.
Of course.
All right, number one podcast listeners, you know how we like to wrap up each episode. Let's hit that Too Much Sense. All right, number one podcast listeners, the Too Much Sense for this episode is the following quote. If you wouldn't say it to someone else, don't say it to yourself. I think give yourself grace, show self-love. We're often our worst critics, and I think sometimes tell ourselves, like, if we're tough on ourselves, it can serve as motivation. But a lot of times that teeters on detrimental really quickly when you're your own worst critic. It's hard to train yourself to be your own biggest fan if it doesn't come natural to you. I know that, number one podcast listeners, it's way easier said than done. But a good starting point is at least start with not being your own worst critic. So let me say that again. It's hard to train yourself to be your own biggest fan if it doesn't come natural to you, but at least start with not being your own worst critic. That's my bar of the episode. Number one podcast listeners, if you wouldn't say it to someone else, don't say it to yourself. It can be debilitating, so go easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace and see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. I've never heard that. It makes a lot of sense.
Speaking of that self-love, show yourself some by getting yourself some Magic Mind. Remember, number one podcast listeners, magicmind.com/prem and enter the code PREM20. Don't play yourself. You already know, number one podcast listeners. That wraps up a brand new episode of the number one podcast in your headphones, Prem Brulee. I've been your host, Premal, joined by my big bro and recent birthday boy, Vish. Thanks for joining me, big bro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything for the number one podcast listeners. Anything for you, little bro.
Thanks, man. All right, number one podcast listeners, you know the deal. Share the episode, like the episode, leave a positive review, share it with a friend, a family member. Go get that Magic Mind for yourself. Do all the things pro Prem Brulee. I appreciate you, number one podcast listeners. I don't take the support for granted, and please keep it up. I promise to keep delivering for you, and we will see you on the next edition.
Peace.